Most people who are stuck in an average life are not lazy, and they are not unintelligent. They are simply missing a small number of specific shifts that separate a life that stays flat for decades from a life that compounds year after year. I want to walk you through 7 of those shifts today. Not vague encouragement. Specific, ordinary decisions that anyone can start making today, regardless of where they are starting from. None of these require a lucky break, a wealthy relative, or a perfect starting point. They require a decision to stop doing what average people do and start doing what the small number of people who actually build something different consistently do instead. One thing worth saying before we start: none of these shifts are about talent, luck, or the family you were born into. Plenty of people with modest starting points have built genuinely remarkable lives, and plenty of people who started with real advantages have stayed stuck for decades. The variable that actually predicts the outcome is whether someone makes these 7 shifts, not what they were handed on day 1. It also helps to know, going in, that these shifts do not need to happen all at once. Trying to overhaul every part of your life in the same week is exactly the kind of ambitious plan that tends to collapse within a few days. Pick one shift that feels most relevant to where you are right now, work on it deliberately for a few weeks, and let the rest follow once that first one starts to feel natural instead of forced. So let's start with the first one. Stop treating your life like a draft. Here is something that quietly keeps a lot of people average for their entire lives. They treat their current situation as temporary, a rough draft they will fix later. Once things calm down, once they have more time, once some external circumstance changes in their favor. The problem is that later rarely announces itself. Most people who are still waiting for the right moment 10 years from now will still be waiting for it 20 years from now, because the moment they are picturing does not actually exist. It is not being withheld from them. It was never coming. The shift that changes this is treating today exactly as it is, as the actual material you are working with, not the imagined version of your life once conditions improve. The real one, with its real limitations, right now. Decide what you actually want, write it down specifically, and set a real date for the next 5 years, not a vague hope that things will eventually get better on their own. Ask yourself plainly, what do I actually want, economically, personally, and in terms of who I am becoming? Most people have never answered that question in specific terms. They have a general feeling that things should be better without ever defining what better actually looks like in concrete numbers, concrete habits, and a concrete date. Alongside this, there is a second half to this shift that people often skip. It is not enough to decide what you want to have. You also have to decide who you are trying to become in the process. The income, the results, the outcomes, all of that tends to follow from the kind of person you are building yourself into, far more than the other way around. Picture 2 people at the exact same starting point, same job, same income, same age. One of them spends an hour this weekend writing down, in specific and uncomfortable detail, exactly what they want their life to look like in 5 years, and exactly what kind of person they need to become to get there. The other one spends that same hour scrolling and telling themselves they will think about it eventually. 5 years later, one of them has been quietly steering towards something specific the entire time. The other one has simply drifted, and drifting rarely lands anywhere particularly good by accident. If you have never done this exercise, it is worth doing before you even finish this video. Take out a piece of paper, and instead of writing vague hopes, write actual numbers, actual dates, and actual descriptions of the kind of day-to-day person you would need to become to get there. Most people find this uncomfortable the first time because it forces a level of honesty about the gap between where they are and where they say they want to be. That discomfort is exactly the point. It is far more useful than another hour of passive daydreaming about a better future. Now here is the second shift. Trade assumptions for actual information. A huge amount of what keeps people average is simply operating on outdated or incomplete information and never noticing it, because updating that information requires deliberate effort most people never make. The world rewards people who are willing to keep learning, long after they have technically finished being required to learn anything. Whoever is gathering better information consistently, year after year, tends to make better decisions than someone equally intelligent who stopped updating their knowledge after school ended. This does not require a formal degree or an expensive program. It requires a habit, reading consistently, seeking out people who know more than you in the areas that matter to you, and treating every mistake as a data point instead of just an embarrassment to move past quickly. One practical version of this. Keep a running list of questions you genuinely do not know the answer to in the areas of your life you most want to improve. Then spend deliberate time each week actually answering a few of them, instead of letting the list just grow indefinitely. Most people accumulate questions their whole lives without ever systematically working through any of them. It is worth being honest about something here. Stupidity, in the practical sense, is rarely about intelligence. It is about refusing to update what you believe when new information contradicts it. The smartest habit you can build is simply staying willing to be wrong and adjust, instead of defending an old belief out of pride. There is a particular trap worth naming directly. Some people confuse consuming information with actually becoming smarter. Watching hours of content about a subject every week, without ever testing any of it against real experience, creates a feeling of progress without the substance of it. The people who genuinely get smarter over time are the ones who pair information with real attempts, real mistakes, and real corrections, not just more passive consumption. Third shift. Convert what you know into an actual plan. Here is where a huge number of people quietly stall out. They read the books, they attend the seminars, they collect the information, and then they never actually build anything with it. They keep gathering material without ever laying a single brick. Picture someone who spends years collecting business books, productivity systems, and self-improvement podcasts, genuinely learning a great deal along the way, but never actually starting the business, never actually changing the habit, never actually making the call. All that learning sits in storage, unused, like construction materials piled up at a site where nothing ever gets built. The shift here is converting everything you have learned into an actual, dated plan. Not a vague intention to do better. A specific plan broken into what you will do this month, this week, and today. If a piece of information does not eventually turn into an action on your calendar, it was essentially decoration, not progress. A useful discipline. For everything new you learn that you consider genuinely valuable, force yourself to write down the one specific action it changes about your week. If you cannot name that action, you probably have not actually learned it in any way that matters yet. You have just been exposed to it. There is a simple way to test whether a plan is real or just a wish. Ask yourself if you could hand it to a stranger and have them know exactly what to do this week without asking you a single follow-up question. Wanting to build a better business is a wish. Contacting 5 potential clients this week and following up with all of them by Friday is a plan. The difference in specificity is usually the entire difference between someone who is building something and someone who is still only hoping to. It is also worth accepting up front that most first plans are not perfect and they do not need to be. A specific imperfect plan that you actually follow this week teaches you far more than a flawless plan you spend another month refining before ever starting. Momentum tends to come from action, and clarity tends to come from that momentum, not the other way around. Waiting for the perfect plan is often just a more sophisticated way of continuing to wait. Fourth shift, and this one surprises people. Get genuinely excited about your own discipline. Most self-help content tells you to get excited about the outcome. The money, the recognition, the finished result. That excitement is real, but it is also unreliable, because outcomes are often months or years away, and excitement about a distant outcome fades quickly on an ordinary Tuesday. The far more durable version of excitement is getting genuinely excited about your own ability to make yourself do the necessary things, especially on the days you do not feel like it. That is a completely different kind of energy than hoping for a good result. It is pride in your own follow-through, which is available to you every single day. regardless of how far away the actual outcome still is. Understand something important here. Your capacity for change is almost never the actual limiting factor. Ordinary people learn extraordinarily difficult skills all the time, under far worse circumstances than most of us are currently dealing with. The limiting factor is almost always whether the decision to change gets converted into today's actions, not some future version of today. You do not need permission to change direction. You do not need the timing to be perfect. Any single day you choose can become the day something shifts, provided you are willing to actually commit to a specific, positive action instead of just feeling inspired and moving on with your afternoon unchanged. A simple way to build this kind of excitement. At the end of each day, instead of only reviewing what you accomplished externally, notice specifically where you did something you did not feel like doing and did it anyway. That is the actual muscle being built. Over months, that muscle becomes far more valuable than any single burst of motivation, because it does not depend on your mood on any given day to keep functioning. Fifth shift. Build in real rest, not just recovery from burnout. Here is the shift almost nobody in a hurry wants to hear, and it is exactly why so many people who work hard still end up unhappy even after they succeed financially. There is a specific kind of imbalance where someone learns how to earn extremely well, but never actually learns how to live well. They accumulate money, status, and achievements, but never build the corresponding skill of actually enjoying any of it, or sharing it meaningfully with the people around them. This shows up in small, telling ways. Someone who worked relentlessly for years to build something finally succeeds, and instead of feeling satisfaction, they feel oddly hollow, because they never built the muscle for enjoying success, alongside the muscle for producing it. Money and achievement without the accompanying skill of living well tend to produce anxiety and isolation rather than the freedom they were supposed to deliver. The shift is deliberately building in real, unproductive time with no agenda, no output, and no metric attached to it. Time with people who matter to you, time alone to actually think clearly instead of just reacting to the next task, and enough distance from your work that you can see it clearly, instead of being buried inside it every waking hour. This is not a luxury reserved for later, once you have made it. It is a structural requirement for actually sustaining any of the other shifts over the long run. People who skip this one tend to burn out precisely at the point where the other shifts start finally paying off, which is a genuinely painful way to lose momentum right when it matters most. A practical way to start. Pick one fixed block of time each week that has absolutely no productive purpose attached to it, and protect it the same way you would protect an important meeting. No phone, no work-related thinking, just genuine rest or genuine connection with someone who matters to you. Most people treat rest as whatever time happens to be left over after everything else. Treating it instead as a scheduled, non-negotiable commitment is often the difference between someone who sustains their progress for years and someone who burns out after an intense but short-lived stretch sixth shift. Choose who you let influence your thinking. The people you spend the most time around shape your standards for what is normal, often more powerfully than any book or seminar ever could. If everyone around you treats a mediocre outcome as perfectly acceptable, it becomes very easy to quietly accept mediocrity yourself, without ever consciously deciding to. This does not require dramatically cutting people out of your life. It requires honesty about which relationships are quietly pulling your standards up, and which ones are pulling them down, and being deliberate about who you spend your most impressionable hours with. Early mornings, weekends, the moments when you are actually forming your sense of what is possible. To kick out, even occasionally, people who are further along than you in the specific areas you want to grow in. Not to compare yourself in a way that discourages you, but to recalibrate your sense of what is actually achievable. It is very easy to underestimate what is possible when everyone around you has quietly settled for the same ceiling. And here is the seventh shift. Track progress in ways you cannot talk yourself out of. One of the quietest ways people stay average is by relying entirely on feelings to judge their own progress. Feelings are unreliable. A genuinely productive month can feel disappointing if you happen to be tired, and a mediocre month can feel great if your mood happens to be good. Neither feeling is a reliable measurement of what actually happened. The fix is simple and unglamorous. Track a small number of concrete numbers relevant to what you are building and review them on a fixed schedule, regardless of how you feel that week. Income, hours invested, specific actions completed, whatever applies to your particular goal. Numbers do not care about your mood, which is exactly why they are more trustworthy than your mood. This single habit alone tends to catch problems months earlier than waiting to feel like something is wrong. By the time a decline is emotionally obvious, it has usually already been visible in the numbers for quite a while. Checking the numbers regularly is simply choosing to find out earlier, while there is still plenty of time to correct course. So, let's bring all of this together. Stop treating your life like a draft, and start deciding specifically what you want and who you are becoming. Trade assumptions for actual information, and keep updating what you know instead of defending outdated beliefs out of habit. Convert everything you learn into an actual, dated plan instead of piling up unused material at a site where nothing ever gets built. Get excited about your own discipline and follow-through, not just the distant outcome you are chasing. Build in real rest and real relationships so that when the results eventually arrive, you actually know how to enjoy them. Choose carefully who influences your sense of what is normal and what is possible, and track your progress with real numbers on a fixed schedule instead of relying on how you happen to feel in any given week. None of these 7 shifts require a lucky break. They require a decision made today to stop operating the way an average life operates and start operating the way a genuinely well-built one does. You do not need to wait for a better starting point. The one you have right now is the only one you will ever actually get to work with. Start there. If you only take one thing from today, let it be this. The gap between an average life and a genuinely abundant one is rarely a single dramatic event. It is usually a small number of specific decisions, repeated consistently over years by someone who simply refused to keep drifting. That decision is available to you, starting with whatever is left of today. 20 minutes from now, you will go back to your ordinary day. The only thing that will have actually changed is whether you decide to treat what you just heard as information to file away, or as the starting point for one specific action you take before today ends. That single choice, more than anything else covered here, is usually what separates the people who watch videos like this one and nothing changes, from the people who watch it once, and it quietly becomes the day everything else started.